There's nothing I'd rather do than return to you.
So for folks who don't know me, I served at Trinity as the youth director, or coordinator of youth ministries. I think my title was back in the day. I started out as a confirmation coordinator in 2010. And then the year later was the youth coordinator doing both high school and confirmation ministries. I stayed there and was done in, I believe it was May or June of 2015. I also was a youth. I graduated from high school in 2009, and I had gone to Trinity youth group when there was like 100 kids in youth group, and Trinity was the place to be. And so I grew up at First Lutheran Church up in Harris. You know, there was like 5 kids in my confirmation class when there was like hundreds of kids in the confirmation classes at Trinity. And so everybody kind of went to youth group at Trinity. And when my sister was in youth group, she is 6 grades younger than me. I was out of college, and I chaperoned a mission trip as a volunteer adult. And the youth director at the time, Sally Hansen, was like, "We have a part-time position. I think you should apply." And I was like, "You don't want me." And I applied, and they hired me. So. When I was working at Trinity, I was also working as a freelance American Sign Language interpreter, which some folks in the pews might remember that. My undergrad was American Sign Language interpreting, and I was trying to get that career up and going, and really struggled with the national certification process. And my old youth director from Trinity, who served 10 years, Krista Anderson, at the height of youth ministry in the late 90s, early 2000s, she was a missionary, and she had come back into the States, and I invited her to join us on a Wednesday evening when we had the confirmands and the high schoolers all together to talk about what missionaries do. And she was like, "You need to go to seminary." And I was like, "I don't want to be a pastor." And she's like, "I went to seminary. I'm not a pastor. You know who I am and what I do." And so she was the one who introduced me to what deacons do. At the time I went through the process, there were multiple avenues for deacons, and I went through the deaconess community. And so I'm still a member of the deaconess community. So I have the option of choosing deacon or sister for a title. And that was really confusing for the youth, because they were like, "You're not a nun." And I'm like, "No, but Lutherans have sisters too." Krista went through seminary and that process while she was at Trinity, and then I did as well. So I did my seminary education while I was at Trinity, and I left. I think it was June, because I wanted to stay for graduation Sunday, and so I overlapped my clinical pastoral education. So it's like a chaplaincy internship was the summer of 2015, and then the fall of 2015 I started my year-long diaconal internship in Chicago. And so I couldn't stay at Trinity. But that was the impetus for the change in that. But yeah. In the ELCA, so we're members of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, there are 2 different types of what we call rostered ministers, or ordained people who have similar training and expertise in ministry. There is ministries of word and sacrament, which Pastor Paul is. And word and sacrament is really, focuses around the congregation, right? Like they are called to the ministry of the word, preaching and teaching, and the sacraments, baptism and communion, and the life that surrounds that. So the church community. And the deacons, what I am, we are ministers of word and service. And service, or the old term, diakonia, I can't remember if it's Greek or Latin, I should know this, but it's really it's service with a justice orientation to it. And so we come up alongside of pastors in churches, and we help people take what they get in worship on Sundays and what they learn in congregations and apply it to your life. So we are the Monday through Saturday types of work. And so word, same teaching and preaching, and then service, like how do we apply what we learn into our lives. And so I still do youth ministry. I do adult education, and I consider that word work. And then I do a lot of outreach ministries, and I do a lot of work building and expanding how the church is seen in the world, but also how people see themselves as a part of the church in the world. So when you do volunteer work, do you see it as I am a volunteer, or do you see it as I am the hands and feet of Christ, expressing that in the world by caring for my neighbor? And so, yeah, that's the difference between a pastor and a deacon.
Cool.
Which gets I mean, if our faith isn't constantly expanding or growing, then I think maybe we're not paying attention, right? I remember in college when my grandma died, and she was not really raised in the church, and then that was where kind of my wondering and questioning about salvation and who goes to heaven and who does God love came into play. And then when I was working at Trinity, I'm sure many of you remember Denise Dahl when she died by suicide, and how traumatic that was for our community. And she was my kindergarten teacher, and I remember talking with her. She served on the altar guild and was just a delightful human being. And I remember Pastor Gary Guptill at the time, and I was like, how do I talk to these kids about this terrifying experience for somebody that we love so dearly and was such an impactful person in our community? And most of the kids knew who she was, and he said, we say we don't know, we lean on grace. And the way that the community surrounded one another in that time showed me what grace was about, and kind of was like this impetus that I am Lutheran because God is there in each and every moment, and we don't know, and that's okay, because God is there, and God is love, and that is more expansive than the pain that we have. That is more expansive than the pain that others feel. And that's what community is all about. But this idea that we come together to support one another and to lift one another up and learn alongside of each other and have discussions around hard topics. And her death was really hard, but it taught me everything that I know about grace, and kind of leaned into me that, like, I want everybody to know what grace is. And it kind of continues to hold me. But other than that, like, just the little things, like when a kid tells you, the church that I'm serving at, Shepherd in Shoreview, we have a preschool, and when kids talk about God in crazy ways, like around Easter one time, there was this little preschooler who was saying, like they put Jesus in like behind a rock, and then all of a sudden he came out and he was like naked, and I was like, oh my God, like just the innocence of, like, maybe he was, yeah, the wrapping was all folded up. Where'd Jesus go? Crazy. But just that innocent, like, experience. And when I see that light turn on in someone's eyes, when they're like, oh, this is bigger than me, or oh, I'm excited to now, share this through some action, whether it be serving on the altar guild, or whether it's, talking with middle schoolers about the crazy hard things that life is. Like, I wouldn't wish middle school on anyone, and everyone has to go through it. And having people who care about them in that time. Talk to people about it. If you are exploring a calling, like, it's great to like muddle it around in your head and to read up on it and research it, but finding people who are willing to be those people to bounce ideas off of, willing to like be realistic with you and be like, are you sure about that? Like, when you have people surrounding you who can be like, oh my goodness, this is the most excited I've heard you in so long, you got to do this. Or people who are like, how can I help make this happen? I can tell you, like, no, that is a terrible idea. That is way more like, let's look at the finances of this.
Mhm.
Like all of those things are great. And when you have somebody to step in, and so another reason why church is important, right? Yes, family, but having community surrounding you in all of the highs and lows and the ups and downs and the wonderings. Yeah, so bring it to the circle, bring it to the men's Bible study, bring it to the, you
Mhm.
know, whatever. Talk to people. So it's, yeah. Because when I was thinking about seminary, like Deb Alec
Mhm.
and Susie Hischer, who was the previous parish admin, and um, Julie Morgan were huge sounding boards for me, along with folks outside of our church community. Um, and then, yeah, um, it's so important. Find people that you can talk with and give you advice or just support you.